Hey folks, Toby Syme here. Today we're speaking with Lawrie Carrozza from Foresight Accounting. Lawrie is a public accountant and strategic advisor, specialising in wealth creation, asset protection and tax minimisation. He's amassed an array of high wealth clients, some with a net worth approaching 300 million. Lawrie predicted the peak in the housing market, which occurred in mid-June 2017, and for years now he was predicting a major economic collapse, one greater than the 2008 global financial crisis, which would potentially lead to the first global economic depression in almost 80 years. Lawrie, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Toby, and pleasure to be here.
Lawrie, it's been quite an eventful 2020 so far, to say the least. How do you see all of this?
Look, Toby, I just think that virus or no virus, this economic meltdown that we're having had to happen. Basically surviving on the back of low interest rates. We had about 26 consecutive interest rates cuts in Australia. So as you drop interest rates, what that does is lures people into debt. It also allows them to able to borrow more money as interest rates fall and their capacity to borrow increases. Most of that went into the housing market. We've got the second highest household debt in the world. And as properties rise, more and more people are sort of anxious to get into the property market. So then they come into the market, and we had basically a stampede towards property, inflated our household debt, and it all had to come to an end. And pretty much most developed countries had the same scenario. We've got record low interest rates all over the world. I mean, this is unprecedented in human history. So in Australia, we had household debt. In America, it's a lot of, in China, it's a lot of corporate debt. They're saying there's nearly $2 trillion of loans in China that probably won't be paid. That's going to have an impact on their economy. And in America, it all started with the GFC when they bailed out all their banks. They've got a lot of government debt. The American government's in a lot of debt. So the whole world economy is bathed in debt at the moment. And I think that the virus was the one that broke the camel's back.
So, Lawrie, people are predicting a quick economic recovery when we all get back to work. I'm curious, how do you see it?
I don't think we're going to have a quick recovery, Toby. I think that what's happening now is a lot of governments are just throwing money at people. In Australia, with the JobKeeper program, there were 6 million applicants for the JobKeeper program. There's only 12 million people that work in Australia, so it's half the working population. So also we've got 2 million casuals that didn't qualify for these programs. So we've got 8 million out of the possible 12 million. Now some of those people will retain their jobs once these lockdowns are scaled back. However, a lot of those jobs are going to be lost forever. All up, I think we're looking at least 20-30% unemployment into the medium to longer term. We'll say over the next 2-3 years. Yeah.
So businesses have clearly taken a massive hit. So what should they be doing now to see them through this period?
Businesses have got to be able to survive. They've got to go in survival mode. They've got to really, really look at their cash flows, cut all expenses where they can. They're not going to be able to keep all their staff on. Maybe they can keep, as a favour, they can keep their staff on the JobKeeper program while it's still around. But once that ceases, they're going to have to possibly get rid of staff, reduce their staff to minimum levels. Maybe perhaps owners will be there on their own. They might have some support staff, but keep your best staff. I think it's provided an opportunity for business to get rid of staff they don't want. They haven't been really contributing to the business, so we can't have any slack there. The other thing is what they can do is there are loans available that are government backed as part of these bailout programs. So basically, you can apply online. The interest rate's around 4.5%. I think they give you roughly up to $80,000. You don't have to make any repayments for 2 years. So it's on a really good rate. There's no repayments. So that's a good way to put some capital liquidity back into the business. You don't have to use that money, of course. But if you find that your business is starting, once we get out of the lockouts, is starting to do okay, then you can use that cheap funding to get rid of maybe some more expensive debt that you've got in the business. So that's another way to do it. With businesses, I think they've got to reinvent themselves a bit. What this whole scenario has exposed is that I think that a lot of businesses didn't have an online presence. So there will be a shift from physical shopping to online shopping more than ever now. So there's actually some businesses actually increasing their sales where others are really struggling. So I think with small business, they need to go to the online presence where they can. They need to start creating online type revenue and not just rely on foot traffic and follow that trend because it's going to continue after this for sure. Yep.
And obviously the follow-on effect from the impact on business is, of course, the share market.
Yeah.
So when we are thinking of the share market, how do you see that progressing? I mean, should we be investing in shares now?
I definitely wouldn't buy any shares right now, Toby. Yep. I think there might be opportunities down the line, and if you're part of our subscriber base, we can give you some recommendations of what you should buy. But for the moment, I think that the share market's a little bit too over optimistic. They're hoping that once these lockdowns cease and things get back to normal, as they say, that everything's going to just fix itself, and that's not going to happen. I see that at the moment the share market in Australia peaked at 7,200 in February. It fell to about 4,500 in the middle of March, and it's rebounded all the way back up to 5,600. I think it's only got maybe 200 to 400 points to go, so it could rise to 5,100 to 6,000, and then I think it's all downhill from there. I think things will get worse, and as I said, we're going to go probably into depression next year, and we could see the ordinaries fall below 3,000 points. So I would probably look at selling your shares maybe when it gets to 5,800 to 6,000. Consider doing that, and probably don't buy shares until it's under 3,000. And the American share market will be similar. I think American share market might rally slightly from where they are now, but I just see a massive drop, and we could see it around probably 10,000 points. And of course, it's not going to be a straight line down. We're going to have upticks as well, and a couple of relief rallies, but that's where it's heading.
So with the impact on superannuation, clearly the funds have fallen drastically.
Yes.
I mean, there's no avoidance of that fact. So what should we do now?
With your superannuation, well, if you're a client of ours, you wouldn't have lost anything because we were shifting all our clients into cash funds late last year. So I sort of gauged that the market was getting a little bit overheated. So I told people to shift their portfolios from growth to cash. Yeah. Now what that means is, for people who don't understand how superannuation works, so when you're with Host Plus or you're one of the industry funds, they've got they've got portfolios. And the portfolios are either high risk or low risk. Now, the highest risk one is growth fund, which is mainly Australian international shares. So most people have got superannuation in a growth fund. So a lot of the superannuation funds automatically put you into that one, because in the long term it outperforms all the other portfolios, right? So, but in the current situation, it's probably a risky portfolio to be in. So, as I said, we've been telling clients late last year to get out and switch to a cash fund. That was a good move, because now they haven't lost a red cent from this market collapse we just had. So if someone that's already in a growth fund, which most people are, I think that once the market gets between 5,800 to 6,000 points, they should probably ring their superannuation company, the one where they got their super, and tell them to switch from their portfolio from a growth fund to a cash fund. And that would ensure any market falls from there on end would be protected. And bearing in mind, you can always switch it back to a growth fund later, once the market has been hit pretty hard, which, as I said, it could fall below 3,000. And that might be an entry point to go back into a growth fund for super.
And what about the property market? What should property investors be doing now?
I think that the property market's going to get hit pretty severely. I think a lot of people see this whole lockdown as a buying opportunity for Australian property. I don't think that's the case at all. I think it's got a long way to go down. It takes several years for property to deleverage. People don't actually sell their house cheaper unless they're forced to. And they're not forced to at the moment, because at the moment the government's got all these programs and they're paying everybody. But as they fail to make the repayments, more houses will be listed on the market, and as you flood the supply, then the houses will get cheap. And you've got to think there's no overseas buyers anymore. So the overseas buyers have left the market. So I think the city market is going to get hit the hardest. We could see falls up to 50% in Sydney. In Melbourne, probably 40%. And the higher and more prestigious these properties are, the harder they'll fall. And the low end properties might fall a bit less. The Brisbane market may be 20%, and I think that Adelaide would probably 10%, and same with Perth. They haven't really had runs. Perth's already been hit pretty hard anyway. But look, I think generally with property, I wouldn't touch it. I think it's toxic. As I said, we're going to go into a economic depression. We're going to get those 4 negative quarters next year. People aren't going to be able to pay their mortgages. There'll be a flood of housing on the market next year, and the bottom in real estate is probably 2 years away. It's going to be a long time before we hit the peaks that we reached back in June 17.
So I suppose in the interim, what government programs should people be taking advantage of now?
Yeah, so we mentioned the business initiatives, and also with businesses, if they're a sole proprietor, they can take out 20 grand of super. They can take 10,000 out before June and 10,000 after July. So that's the first thing. And secondly, anyone that's lost their job can do the same thing. Again, if you're young and you've still got a long way to go, I probably suggest you do that because you're going to have to write it out. You might run out of funds personally. You could find yourself in a bit of trouble. Any cash that you can put away is probably a good thing. Yeah. If you don't actually have a need for it, once things start to settle, which might be years away, as I said, you can always put it back into your fund.
So in regards to our money, where should we be keeping it to protect it?
If you put cash in the bank, well, we don't know whether there will be a bank run or there'll be some bank failures next year. We had some problems during the GFC with that. The Australian banks were unaffected, but now our Australian banks are carrying a lot of household debt, and if these people fail to make payments, then the banks are in trouble. So if I had cash in the bank, I would probably pay down all my loans or prepay my loans. So if you put $100,000 in your loan, you won't have to make repayments for probably 5 years or whatever your yearly repayment is. Yeah. So you prepay your loans. I would keep some cash at home. I would minimise the amount of cash I have in the bank. If you're going to have cash in the bank and you're a business, probably move it to a business account. I don't think they're going to freeze business accounts because they want business to keep freely operating. So I'll move to the business account. If I was to choose a bank, I'll probably go with the Commonwealth Bank. I think that they're probably the most secure bank out of all the majors. Also, I think if the Commonwealth failed, I think it'd be the first bank the government would bail out because they've got the most depositors, and as the next government bank as well. So I will do that. Also, probably keep some gold and silver on the side as well. I don't think gold's going to be a great investment. I think we'll go to 2,000 US. It's around 1,700 an ounce at the moment. It'll probably go to 2,000. But during next year, I think it could fall below 1,000 points as people sell off their gold for money. And silver's good to have as well. The reason why it's good to have silver, because in the last depression they confiscated gold. The government confiscated all that. I don't think they're going to confiscate gold this time because there's no central banks don't need gold to be able to create new money. So I think they won't confiscate it. But that's why it's good to have silver as well. So to have each of those two commodities will be a good in a calamity. But I don't think they're a great investment. I think once the market probably bottoms out, as I said, there might be some. I think we're going to have an agricultural boom. I think we're going to start to take control of our food supply and become a little bit more protective and defensive in how we run this country. So I think we're going to have an agricultural boom, and there's going to be some good stocks in that space to buy, and they'll do well during the whole depressionary, recessionary period. We don't know. We've got to wait and see as it goes along. We'll have some trigger points where we can make some suggestions and people can look into it and get the financial advice and be able to enter those markets.
Yeah. So, Lawrie, where do you see the investment opportunities of the future?
I mean, look, as I said before, I think that I see there's an agricultural boom. I think there's money to be made, or it's not going to be anything dramatic, but it's going to preserve your wealth and you'll get a return on your capital. It's not going to be anything fantastic, but given the climate, at least you're not losing money. Yeah. I think that once property bottoms out, there will be opportunities there. We'll get cheaper, the yields will go up. So, but that might be a few years away before we can re-enter that market. The yields just are not there. If you look at the property market at the moment, there's properties on 2% yields. I mean, that's just ridiculous. So they need to get up around 5 or 6%. And I see that there might be some opportunities to invest.
So, Lawrie, you've painted a fairly bleak picture for small to medium businesses in the short term. But are there any positives that you can see from this downturn?
First of all, houses are going to get cheaper. So that means the next generation can buy a house without having to mortgage their life. So, and we're going to get back to a real economy where, wages are comparative to debt, where the wages can actually pay the debt down. I mean, no one wants to borrow to buy a house and having to pay it off their entire life. We're talking 25, 30-year loans and people going into retirement with a debt still. So the good thing about this is property values are going to come back to where they should be. The next generation is going to be able to purchase those houses at a much reduced mortgage, and they'll be able to pay them a lot quicker. So that's one positive. So I don't think property's going to have the boom that we had before. We won't see the heights of these property prices for a long time. But I think there will be an entry point where the yields will be better. There'll be a massive opportunity to buy some shares once that's bottomed out. So we're looking under 3,000 points. There's going to be some good buying. I think you're going to be able to have to buy the right ones. I wouldn't be buying Westfield, for example, because I think commercial real estate is going to take a bit of hit from this because we're going to go online. So there's always going to be a commercial real estate sector, by the way, but I think it's going to diminish. If people re-engineer the business, there's going to be a massive online boom from all this. people will be afraid of future viruses and more lockouts. And so, and because what this whole thing has wakened people up to having an online presence, because their business was completely exposed from this, and they don't want to be caught out again. So, and it was always going that way anyway. So it's just basically push it forward. So I think there's going to be a massive trend towards online businesses, and people are going to re-engineer their business for an online presence bigger than before. And the other thing is, I should mention, is there's only 6 countries in the world that actually got good demographics. Most of Europe's got an ageing demographic problem. So their populations are older and they're going to stay on that track. But in Australia, we've actually got there was a government policy back in the late 90s, which was called the baby boom. I don't know if you remember that.
I do.
Yeah, so it was probably the best policy ever that a government's ever come out with, because what it did create is when they did the baby bonus, it created a baby boom. So the oldest of those kids are now 22. So 3 years' time, they'll be 25. They'll start to get their first job. They're going to buy their first cars. 5 years after that, they're going to buy their houses. And so because we've got a big group there, youth that's probably as big as the baby boomers, that's going to drive our economy. So Australia's well placed for this. America's not as good as ours, but okay, they're probably neutral with their demographics. And Harry Dent's done a lot of work on demographics, and I agree with a lot of things he's done. So, but there's only 6 countries, including Australia and New Zealand, that have got good demographics, and that's going to drive our economy. So we're going to get out of this pretty well. But after some pain, we've actually just borrowed, which was put too much money on the credit card, too much household debt. All those debts have to be liquefied in some way or paid back somehow. And then once all that pain's gone, then we can get back to real economy in 3 years' time.
Well, Lawrie, thank you so very much for taking the time to answer the questions here today. For people that want to learn more, what's the best way to get in contact with you? Yeah,
the best thing, Toby, is just send us an email to mail@foresightaccounting.com.au, and we'll make arrangements. Yeah, and we'll be able to give you updates as things progress.
Fantastic.
Yeah, no, is it?
Again, thank you so very much for your time.
Thanks very much, Toby.
And thank you for yours. We look forward to seeing you again in the next video.